If you've been wondering how you can improve your photography, then today's video is for you, because I want to cover my essential compositions that I use for all of my social media photography. And whether you're looking for tips on your travel photography, street photography, lifestyle photography, it doesn't really matter, because the fundamentals that we're going to be covering today are relevant for every single niche and genre that photography actually encompasses. And the cool thing about today's video is that I'm actually going to be taking a POV video that I made and using it as an example with every single photo that I took from the day to show you exactly what I was thinking in the moment to capture the photo that I did and walk you through the basic compositional elements of what makes this photo captivating. I thought it would be very useful to go back to basics, showing you what compositions are actually good for social media so that you can incorporate them in trending formats that you actually see in order to level up what it is exactly that you're posting on the platforms. And after all, I want this channel to focus on how to succeed and thrive in the creator economy, and making photography for your social media channels is a massive part of that. And without delaying this intro any longer, let's jump on into some composition tips. All right, so we're going to be going through a lot of different photos in today's video, but this first one was actually a really nice one. And whenever I've gone to Unionville, it was something that I've always wanted to capture. And that is of this white house with the blue accents. And the composition tip that I used here was balance and symmetry. And so symmetry obviously is when something is made up of equal parts on both sides. And balance in this image specifically is because there is equal weighting with the buildings on both sides of this photo. This next one is going to be another sort of standard photo along with it. And this one I used by trialing isolation. And isolation is a very useful tool when you're capturing your photos for social media. Why? Is because we want our subjects to stand out. Even if you're taking lifestyle photos, the focus needs to be on you. And while this is a fairly simplistic photo of someone on a motorbike, that red pop of the sweater, along with this feeling that it's just one lone biker, even though there's a crowd in the background, really draws your viewers' attention to that specific subject. Another sort of easier composition that you could take advantage of is the use of repetition. And this photo right here is using repetition with repeating the window frames over and over again. All right, the next photo is a cool one, and that's because I literally just looked out the corner of my eye and managed to see a Ferrari. And you know, Unionville is definitely a wealthier area of Toronto. It's a suburb just north of the city. Highly recommend visiting if you are visiting Toronto, or even if you're from Toronto and have never been. So there's a lot of nice cars, and when this Ferrari was there, I was like, how am I going to capture this thing? Now, it wasn't really in the best spot for me to actually get a good photo of it. So unfortunately, I missed the front of the vehicle and managed just to take a shot of it from the side on a 45-degree angle. And it led me to this photo. And the composition here that was used is leading lines. And to be honest, leading lines are my favorite photography composition for a few different reasons. The first one is when you see this car in frame, you'll notice that it goes with a row of cars all the way down the image. And this is a great way to sort of capture your viewer's eye and guide their attention throughout the frame. And the cool part about this photo is that the line in the middle of the road, even though it's not painted, it's still there, still sort of helps tell a bit more of a story and showcase more of the frame itself than just the Ferrari. And because the cars were just so easy to spot, there was a Dodge Challenger that drove by and thought it'd be cool to sort of show this more isolation color harmony combination in my photos. And so I managed to grab this one as it drove off into the distance. And why I say color harmony is because the vehicle's green. And if you notice, there's sort of three major colors that actually show up in this photo. The color of the car and the color of the trees are the same. So you have that going on. You have the white of the buildings, which means that there are two different colors in this shot. And then you have the third color elements, which are those sort of more brown tones. And if you take these three tones, you have color harmony, because it's when we use complementary or analogous color schemes in order to create a mood or that sense of harmony. And so these three colors generally work very well together. and create an aesthetically pleasing image. And moving on to the next photo, as I walk down the street, I notice that there's sort of like this bush with some cool colors on it. It's just green and white. And again, because we have color harmony in this photo with the blues, the whites, the browns, and we have that green and white pattern still going on, that's what initially caught my eye. But it's the diagonals in this image that I actually want to highlight as a compositional element. Similar to leading lines, these help draw your viewer's eye through your photo and just lead to them being more engaged as they're actually looking for it. In that theme of isolation, we've got more red tones down the road. This was a very cool looking Corvette. If you know the year, drop it in the comments below. But that pop of red and sort of it driving alone on the road in the sort of the beautiful little cityscape going on was a great way to sort of isolate my subject. All right, and as I walk down the road, there are a ton of couples in this area too. It's obviously a very romantic area, so it was very easy to sort of do street photography. And this next photo is not all that interesting, but it is probably the essential composition for any content creator, is learning how to use the rule of thirds. And the reason why is because it is a standard sort of framing technique where we take the points of intersection along a grid that divides up our frame and place our subject either in the middle of it or at any of the points of intersection along this grid. And this is a natural area that we want to bring viewers' attention toward. And right after that intersection, I saw sort of like the famous Unionville gazebo. There's like a ton of street festivals here, little like bands, concerts in the park. It's always a good vibe in the summer. So I wanted to capture it. It's been something I've been meaning to capture for a while, to be honest with you. And I've never really found an interesting way to actually do that in my mind. So I thought I'd use a different composition technique called layering here. And layering is really cool because it's when you divide up your frame into 3 different parts: your foreground, your midground, your background, and then try to put different elements within each one in order to, again, bring your viewer through your photo. And so I tried doing that with that Unionville sign, sort of like the shadows and light going on in the midground, and then the background is actually the gazebo itself that I want somebody to pay attention to. And the combination of it is sort of telling this more cohesive story. And that's in fact one way to think about things, but the secret behind this photo is actually a composition technique called the golden ratio. And this is a unique way to sort of level up the rule of thirds. A lot of people say that the rule of thirds and the golden ratio kind of use the same math to really draw attention into the photo. So you can kind of get away with using both, but the golden ratio says to follow this line pattern through your photo, and where it ends is where someone's attention is going to be naturally drawn to. So whether you put up the rule of thirds or you put up the golden ratio, you should lead to a similar outcome. But the cool thing is that even though where the golden ratio ends and where one of the thirds is in this photo, so it naturally draws our viewers' attention there, the layering technique of this photo means that we still bring our viewers' attention throughout it to the gazebo in the background, which is a natural point of intersection for the rule of thirds. So it kind of has this bigger dynamic to it that just makes it overall more interesting. The next photo then is also going to be a golden ratio. I saw this couple walking out towards the restaurant out in the distance. It's a really gorgeous red like looking barn area next to some water. There's a cool patio along the way. It was pretty empty though, so I wasn't actually able to get a lot of photos, but this couple here looked pretty cool walking towards it the way the light was hitting the building. So I snapped that one. And then obviously putting up the golden ratio, they fall roughly on line with where we want our viewers' attention to go. Definitely follows the rule of thirds and overall leads to, I'm going to say, a pretty cool image. And I just love the way the colors actually pop in this one. So keeping in mind that sort of rule of thirds, golden ratio, when you're placing your subjects in your images is going to be extremely important to actually creating a good photo. Another easier one here is back at the gazebo, and this was a depth of field shot where I simply just took a flower that I found, put my lens to 70 millimeters and isolated my subject using a high depth of field. And while depth of field might not necessarily be a compositional element, it is a great technique to lead to interesting photos of maybe a very simple subject. And so that's why the easiest way to actually get a viewer's attention with your photography is to use a high depth of field. And while it might not always be the best technique to use at every single situation, it's definitely one that's very fun to do when it's done well and is extremely popular on social media for the obvious reason that that if you're using a good quality lens, you're going to get a very nice bokeh background, a high depth of field, quick attention towards that subject, and overall just leads to a very nice image if you're doing it tastefully. Walking away from that area, again, there's just tons of couples, and so I wanted to obviously be respectful of people, and so I generally tried to stay away from photographing somebody's face when I can. But this couple was walking in what looked to be an archway if you wanted to be creative with it. And so I captured a photo using a technique. And this is because by using this technique, you're utilizing a frame in your natural environment, like here with the flowers off to the left and the fence off to the right, to naturally create a frame with where your subject's actually going to be. Doing this helps to draw your viewer's attention to a specific area of your photo and overall just lead to that more captivating image. And so if you're seeing any trend here today, it's that the goal is to capture someone's attention with our photos, using compositional elements to more intentionally place our subjects, and just keeping them in mind as we're going along with our photography is going to be the thing that's going to be able to do that. And again, this is a good example with our next photo. I'm seeing this Lamborghini Urus drive right past me, same road, same sort of idea, the line through the middle of the road. I've got the natural sort of road shape that I'm able to take advantage of, pointing directly to where the car is going to be, grabbing this shot with the Lamborghini just going down the street, creating a nice image similar to that other previous one of the Corvette. All right, and this next photo was one that I wanted to capture for a while, but obviously the lighting conditions was a little bit challenging because the sun's actually backlighting in the western direction what the buildings are on the street. So editing for exposure and creating the vibe I wanted definitely didn't really work out too well, but I managed to bring out this shot, which has the white Audi in front of the old fire hall. And I'm gonna say that this compositional element is in fact juxtaposition. And the reason why I say that is juxtaposition is when you have two contrasting elements that lead to a more interesting shot. And so the entire environment is actually brown. It's sort of older tones. It's a lot more historic looking than the white Audi. Whereas you then have this white Audi popping in frame. It's modern. It's very different than what the environment is that it's actually sort of a part of. And so this leads to sort of somebody looking at that white Audi going like, why is that in this environment? It doesn't really fit. So it kind of leads to this cool shot in my opinion. And this is a technique I use in a lot of my urban photography, especially downtown Toronto. There's a lot of combinations of new and old that you can do that naturally just lead to a good photo. And it's something to keep in mind if you're definitely struggling to find a good shot to take somewhere. And then the rest of today's video is going to be a lot of similar compositions. One thing that I'm always trying to do when I'm out doing my street photography is capturing interesting photos that inevitably can connect and tell a good stories. And then of course, ending things off with some other examples of subframing with people on the streets. Maybe it's a guy sitting down reading a book in between a pillar and a wall, and then examples of artificial light where it looks cool. I had a mist filter on my camera lens, so even though this is just a car driving down the street, the subject in this photo is in fact the car headlight, and so that leads to an interesting shot because it looks cool. It's part of the car. There's a vibe now, and overall is pretty aesthetic if you ask me. And so with that, that's going to cover a lot of the main photography compositions that I take advantage of. Everything you've seen here today are sort of the low-hanging fruit ones that you can keep in the back of your mind and just constantly think about and bring up when you're out looking for photos. You might not think that an interesting subject is there, but if you know what your composition elements actually are, then you might be able to start seeing things that you wouldn't have seen had you have not actually studied what composition techniques you can have in like your toolbox, if you want to talk about it that way. So with that, my number one piece of advice is to learn your photography compositions. It's going to translate over to every piece of social media content that you actually make, helping everything look a lot nicer and really help to level up your photos, and inevitably also translate over to what video content you make, given that reels and carousels now pretty much require videos if you're going to get any traction on the platform. So with that, I hope you found the part one sort of composition review useful for you, and leave a comment down below if there's any other things you're wondering about content creation in the creator economy space, social media marketing, etc. I'm happy to make other videos about it. So with that, thank you for watching. There are going to be some exciting videos on the way, and I'll see you all in the next one.